these 14 objectives were reduced to 7 important objectives to be achieved or worked on. And each member nation has been given one particular objective to work on, making formulating policies, the working schedule, etc. and the program, which should be ratified by the group, and then every member nation would work on it. So I think that's a very good arrangement. Now, let me just go through the objectives a little in detail so that we understand that what is Bimstec trying to achieve for the region, for the country, the members in this organization. First and most important aspect is trade, investment and development. That means increasing the dependency or interdependency of these nations which are in this group, so that proper economic development would take place in a balanced manner based on the needs of each and every nation in this group. And the economies would be developed in a balanced manner, all the 3 sectors, that is agriculture, services and manufacturing. And the needs of each nation would be different, and therefore there has to be a balance in these 3 aspects of economic development, so the benefits reach every person in that country and every person in this group of states in Bimstec. A second important objective is environment and climate change. I think the world has been very negligent in terms of sustaining the environment and preventing climate change in terms of temperature increase, etc. And I think most of the bad or the adverse influences on the environment and the climate has been contributed by the developed nations now. I think they have recklessly used the natural resources, gone about development in a fixated manner, not looking after the requirement of our nature and environment. So, as a group of nations, I think Bimstec has to make sure that we represent the needs and the perception of the developing nation, the South, so that our interest is looked after. The people who have actually vitiated the environment in terms of land or soil pollution, in terms of air pollution, in terms of water pollution, be it the seas, rivers, lakes, and everything. So that has to be controlled, and that has to be represented appropriately, so that everybody contributes towards environment retention or revival, as well as controlling the climate change. Because of climate change, with temperature rise and the level of sea rising rapidly in next few years, the most affected countries will be the coastal areas, especially in Bay of Bengal, and therefore Bimstec nations have a huge stake in this respect. Third objective is security and energy. These are huge areas of concern and joint action in the 3 from the Bimstec. Fourth is agricultural and food security. I think as far as food security is concerned, this region is very well off. It can feed its people, and of course we need to increase the productivity of the land that we have for growing crops, be it cash crops, cereals, vegetables, fruits, etc. I think that is one area we need to work on. Fifth is people-to-people contact, basically to enhance cultural bonding, tourism, music, so many other aspects, which is actually the soft part of the region. Sixth is science, technology, and innovations. I think the entire region needs to work together through programs so as to carry out scientific research, develop new technologies as also innovations, and jointly work on them, and whatever you achieve, that should be utilized for economic development and betterment of the people of the region. The last point is connectivity. The world is now so well connected by various means, and as a result, we call the world as global village. The connectivity in this region is not as good. I think there is a need to work on the connectivity issues, infrastructure, so that we really have proper bonding and proper movement of people, ideas, trade, commerce, etc. So these are the 7 objectives. I think they're very good objectives, but we need to work wholeheartedly to achieve them. There are certain problem areas or vulnerabilities which I'll cover subsequently, but now I'll bring out some of the special characteristics of the Bimstec regional grouping. First is, it is perhaps the most populous region in the world. 15th November is the International Population Day. The United Nations on 15th November 2022, just recently, 4 months back, had published some data about the world's population. It mentions that while the world's total population is about 8 billion, but 1.73 billion people live in Bimstec countries. That is about 22% of the world's population. And soon, in another decade, because of our fertility rate is higher than the developed nations where the population is shrinking, I think Bimstec region will contribute about 1/4 of the world population in 10 years' time. But something special about the population, most of the people in this region are young. They are less than 40 years age. So if we can have good programs, infrastructure, individually as a nation or as a group, to feed them, shelter them, give proper medical care, health care, clothe them, educate them, give them good skill sets and job opportunities. I think this population was so young, would be very, very productive, and they will be a boon to this region and to each member nations and not a pain. That is a lot of work to be done. Second point is in terms of special characteristics, I would say economically, this region, most of the nations are developing nations. And in fact, very large percentage of our people in this region live below the poverty line, BPL. So a lot of work needs to be done so that poverty alleviation program actually becomes effective. Third point is availability of cheap labor, as well as natural resources in plenty. And these are the factors which is actually attracting foreign direct investment in the region, in these countries, for creating alternative source of production and manufacturing. They are becoming alternative hubs. In the recent pandemic, which is still continuing, the world realized its vulnerability of depending on only one particular source, one nation, which became the manufacturing hub of the world over the last 15, 20 years. So, having realized that, I think now diversification is taking place of the manufacturing hubs, and our region, the Bimstec region, is likely to benefit from this, and we must make use of this opportunity. Next is, HDI, Human Development Indices, has not been very good in the region, the Bimstec region. It is improving in most of the nations in the region very rapidly, but we are still behind the world average. In terms of formal GDP, the GDP of the Bimstec nations is $4.4 trillion. These are the figures I have got from the internet. But if you take the PPP terms, purchasing power parity terms, it is $15 trillion. It is neither good nor bad, but there is a lot of work to be done to improve the quality of life and standard of living of people through economic growth. Historically, this region has been unfortunate that the entire region missed out on the first industrial revolution, which took place in Europe and USA in the 18th and 19th centuries. That time, most of the countries in this region, Bimstec region, were under colonial rule. So we did not benefit from the first industrial revolution that took place there. In fact, we supplied all the raw materials for them to prosper further, making use of those technologies. They did not trickle down to these nations in Bimstec area. Secondly, this region also missed out on the second industrial revolution which took place, between the First World War, during First World War, Second World War, and the intervening period, and also post Second World War. What happened? Most of the nations that are involved in these two conflicts, the World War I and II, were the colonial powers in Europe. And the Second World War, of course, countries like Japan and US got involved due to various reasons later on. But most of these countries, the colonial powers of Europe, actually gained tremendously through the second industrial revolution because they worked on war footing, to get hold of latest technologies through research and development so that their warfighting capabilities improved tremendously, which did. But these are all dual-use technologies. Military technology is dual-use technology. So these technologies could be applied in the civil field for improving products and services, as also improving economic development and quality of life. Though these countries, they themselves are devastated, destroyed totally during the Second World War, but since they had the technologies that they developed during the time, they made use of that dual-use technologies not only in the military domain but also in civilian domain in various fields, and they revived the economy very rapidly, and they became the economic entities to reckon with in the world. Japan, Germany, England, and all these countries. Unfortunately, the Bimstec region provided a lot of resources to the Allied powers, especially through manpower, soldiers in millions, a war chest, raw materials, resources, etc., so that they could improve their war-fighting or war-waging capability. But hardly anything trickled down from them in terms of technology transfer to these nations which they had exploited for hundreds of years, being colonial powers, having colonial mindset. Whatever trickled down, was towards their effort to get hold of more resources from this area for their own economic development or otherwise. And this trickling down effect did not compensate the losses that these nations in Bimstec areas suffered because of the colonial exploitation. So this is something we must remember why we are in the state that we are or we were about 30, 40 years back. There are a lot of strengths in the region. This region, first strength I would say, it has a lot of fertile land, a lot of forests, a lot of sunshine, a lot of natural resources, water resources, rivers, suitable climatic conditions to grow not one, at least two crops every year from the same plot of land. So we produce a lot of food grains, fruits, vegetables, etc. to support the burgeoning population in this region. And we have surplus to feed many other countries in the world, which we noticed during the pandemic disruption of life patterns. Unfortunately, most of the countries in the north, which have very cold climate, their land remains snowbound for almost 4 to 6 months of time. So they can just about grow one crop. Therefore, they cannot support population of the order that we can support in this region or in Asia. We have very huge natural resources, including the resources in the maritime domain, the Bay of Bengal. And I think if we exploit the resources in the maritime domain, we will develop our economy very rapidly. And I think that this region is not going to miss the current industrial revolution. I will not call it industrial revolution, but technological revolution that the world is going through in terms of digital revolution, ITES, artificial intelligence, cyber domain, etc. And I think the people in this region do not lack entrepreneurial skills, nor do they lack knowledge or professional skills, but we lack in this region the opportunities to better ourselves and be more productive, as I mentioned earlier. Hence, most of our professional people, the good people, the brains, are actually moving out to the developed nations. It's like bringing coal to Newcastle. So they are benefiting further. All these people are doing well. The diaspora from the Bimstec nations in the developed world is contributing tremendously in their economic growth, in their welfare, in their standard of living and quality of life. So what we need to do as a Bimstec group is that we create better learning institutions, research institutions, so that we can retain this talented youth in this region for our own economic growth. I'll just go through some of the vulnerabilities that we have. I mentioned earlier, there are many areas of friction between nations in the region, which is actually are becoming roadblocks in achieving the objectives that BIMSTEC has set itself for, like the Rohingya crisis, border issues between various nations, rift over fishing rights and zone. Secondly, internal political instability dynamics, not very good. Economic crisis, showing its head quite often. Weapon, drug trafficking, insurgencies, these factors are actually holding us back. They are the bumpers or roadblocks in our progress toward achieving the objectives. Then the COVID-19 pandemic, actually, the fallout has been very, very severe.